Good morning, happy Friday, and welcome back. So I know we're a bit of a smaller group today, but I want to use today as an opportunity to help you to think about your group project for this class, where you're working on observing a small group and figuring out what you notice about small group communication. And I also want to get into our discussions surrounding group motivation. So we'll pick up where we left off in group motivation and get more into the specifics there. So to get us started for your part one of attendance for today, what I want to have you do is to just take some time to do a bit of a check-in. So remember that your small group observation essay is due on March 6th. So that's coming up, not this weekend or coming Sunday, the following Sunday. So knowing that it's coming up and knowing, right, this is an assignment that you can't just complete the night before, but one that will require you to take that time in advance to find and observe a small group meeting. Just take a time to note if you've identified a small group in a specific meeting that you're observing. Remember, for this assignment, I'm asking you to observe a small group that you are currently not a member of. So maybe this is a club, an activity, an organization, or group that a friend, a colleague, or somebody else is a part of, but not one that you regularly attend meetings for or are part of yourself. If you have identified a small group, figure out which one that is, when they're meeting. You should be able to have that squared away. But if you haven't, I want you to take some time to continue to brainstorm ideas, including clubs and activities available on campus for possible group meetings to attend. I really, really recommend, if you haven't already initiated that contact, to, by the end of the day, reach out. Again, I posted on Canvas a template of how you could send an email to an organization or club that might be having meetings, right? So this is a crucial time for you to get all of that stuff together to plan out your meeting. You might have a backup meeting or two available as well. And then the other thing that I want you to do and check in on, if you have a device with you for today, is last week I posted a Google form that is meant to indicate your availability during week 10, the last full week of the quarter. We are going to have folks present their small group observations. So I want you to indicate which days you will be available to come to class. And you're not available, which days you've marked as unavailable to. Also gives you the chance to share your preferences. I'll do my best to honor those. So that way I can get that schedule out. Unless there's an event, like for instance, you're under quarantine, or there's a major crisis or something that's come up, I would ask folks to come face to face if they can for their presentation day. And if you're not scheduled to present on a particular day, right, still a good idea to come to class in order to support and to listen to what other folks in the class are working. you have your get out of jail free card and you want to use it on your observation essay, you can do that, and that'll be extended by a week. You know, the one assignment that you could use that for would be for your presentation, just because we have that limited week time to do so. So if you are pushing back turning in your presentation, what I encourage you to do is to get to a point in which you have sort of the core materials and group observation that you put together for that presentation. So again, I'll post the schedule along with more details about the presentation. Should hopefully have all of the remaining availability people have entered in by the end of the day today. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was with regard to the weekly quiz. And because of the delay in accident, obviously created a delay in getting that up. So I'm going to push back and extend the deadline on that quiz by a week. I will also post the week 9 quiz. We won't have a quiz for the final week since that week is just presentations. So that'll give you a good window in order to complete the remaining quizzes and assignments for the course. So look forward to that. And again, I want to try to make the end of the quarter be as clear and organized for you in regards to remaining things that you need to do for the class. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions about the class at this point, about the small group observation assignment, or anything else?
If we turned,
Oh, you're good, Haley. What's up?
Turned our small group observation or small group assessment in late. When will we get the grades back for that?
So my goal is to have that back to everybody before Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And if you want to turn in like a rough draft of either your presentation or your observation essay, you're always welcome to do that as well. If you're concerned about your score or just want to do the best that you can.
Awesome.
Other thing you should note, right, is that if you've missed more than 3 classes, then that is starting to affect your attendance rate. Please complete those makeup assignments for classes that you've missed using the video and slides if you're at more than 3 absences in the class. Again, small group is due by March 6th. Last class, we talked about this idea of motivation as well as the idea of collaboration, right? The idea that when we're participating and working together in a small group, one of the key things we need to do is get people, you know, rolling the boulder and getting people started on a project. Motivation is about giving people a reason to do a thing, right? B.F. Skinner, behaviorists and psychologists, right, suggest that, you know, the rat pushes the button, they get a treat. The dog shakes their paw, they get a treat, right? So in the same way, we as humans are motivated by rewards and incentives to complete tasks. And in small groups, collaboration, the ability of multiple group members to work together to achieve a goal adds an additional element to motivating groups to behave. We also talked about how factors, including how people feel physically, their interest and motivation toward a task, and their receptiveness to things like feedback, can compel people to participate and work together in a group. And we talked about the idea that when we participate in groups that were motivated by intrinsic rewards, we like golf in an end of itself, or extrinsic rewards, we like golf because we're on scholarship and being on the golf team lets us go to school, right? So we deal with these different motivations that compel us to participate in groups in different ways. So for this class, we'll be talking a little bit more about how we can motivate groups to behave and participate and be involved in tasks. We'll also talk about some of the challenges and issues that come up in group participation, as well as the role of things such as feedback that play a really big part in the group participation process. So when it comes to motivating or compelling people to work together in a group, there's a few been found as being effective, right? One idea that we talked about last class is the idea that if somebody feels powerless, that they feel unable to complete a task or unable to get, what was promised for completing a task, then that can be a really big issue. So one of the first things that can be really helpful, especially if you're a group leader or you're managing a group project, is to tell somebody what you want them to do in as specific of a way as possible, right? Oftentimes, if you're working on like a group presentation or project for a class, one of the greatest problems that comes up is that you don't have people that are pulling their weight or doing their work, or you have confusion among group members about who should be doing what. So one really easy way to do that is to say, hey, we're going to break up this reading that we need to present on for the class. I'm going to focus on pages 300 to 310. You focus on pages 311 to 320 and type up about a page of notes about that section of the reading. So the more specific you are, right, the clearer it is for members of the group as to what you're doing. And also, it's important to think about how things such as culture can shape some of the ways that things might be misinterpreted. What does it mean to take notes or to observe or to write for a project? Might mean different things based on your note-taking styles or ways that you do reading. So you want to be as clear as possible, knowing that some of these goals can be interpreted differently. Measuring somebody's performance and figuring out if they are doing the activity or issue that's in question is really important, right? So measuring performance might be done through goals. For instance, our goal by the end of the week is to develop an outline for our group presentation. An outline means that we have a written 1 to 2 page document that goes over the major concepts or ideas that we intend to cover. Setting milestones for performance and collaboration in a group is a really good way to ensure that you're on track, right? Measuring out and making sure that people are where they need to be is useful, especially when you're managing or working in a group. And early on, you can tell that things are falling a little bit behind or going off track. Third is the idea that, again, oftentimes we're not necessarily adhering to theory Y or this idea that we inherently want to do the best job. If we're working or doing a job or doing an assignment or a project, typically we want to get a good grade. We want to, show off for our boss or coach. Usually there's another incentive there, right? And one really clear way to help out a group to work well is to make clear what the incentive or the reward for completing the task is. For instance, if all of you show up to work overtime, right, you'll receive overtime pay totaling this amount. That might help people participate and then therefore really know what that extra pay means and therefore the motivation to go in. Or if you regularly come to practice and you train, then your reward is that you'll be able to help us win the game. So making it really clear to people what they get out of it, what that reward is a really important way to ensure that people are working together. And then making good on your promise, right? You might think about, for instance, carrots and sticks, the idea that there is both an incentive or reward for doing a task that, they get, like a horse gets a carrot, right? Or horse gets hit with a stick to compel them to go because it's a punishment for not acting. The same way, if you're promising a reward or incentive for accomplishing a task, for instance, if we can all complete our group meeting agenda, then we can get out early. Then, if you've completed it, let them out early, right? Don't let the meeting go on and backtrack on your promise. So really make sure that you're able to provide whatever it is that you're promising the group and are able to really show that thing will be given. Because if it's not, people are going to start to distrust you and not feel like there's any reason to do something because promising a reward and you're not getting it. Another core idea, and this relates again to behaviorism and an idea that we have to measure or patterns of behavior or action, is this idea of an interior state, right? So In order to understand how groups are motivated, how groups behave, and how groups act, we have to understand what motivates them on the inside, right? The idea that when you are working with people on a school project, or you're collaborating on a team or activity on campus, right? That there's a lot going on inside people's heads. They have fears, they have, these kind of physiological, social, and cultural needs, that there is a lot that we need to factor in, right? So interior states, what's going on mentally and psychologically with somebody is a really important consideration when we're thinking about how to motivate a group, right? For instance, a lot of folks have felt maybe very destabilized or concerned or anxious who've been following the news, right? And following everything with Russia and Ukraine. So as a result of that, that impacts somebody's interior states, that they might be distracted, less focused, less on topic, and so on. So we need to think about how some of those social and psychological factors will impact our participation in groups. When it comes to helping motivate or compel group members to work effectively, there's a few strategies that can really be useful for motivating and compelling your participation. So one thing that we talked about last class is the idea that setting up goals is really important, right? People need to know their milestones, how they're able to complete and meet those milestones, and so on. And one key way to do that is to let people in a group set up those goals together. Not only does it let people have a good conversation with each other, figure out where they're coming from, but it also helps every person feel invested in the goals. For instance, right, if you're coaching a soccer team and your goal is to, score at least 3 points in this upcoming game, then that really helps the group members feel like they've been involved in creating that goal, right? Secondarily, creating specific goals is really important too. So saying, I need to get better at soccer, or I need to lift more weights, right? It's not really a specific or useful goal, because how do you measure that? So saying, I need to be able to bench up to 150 pounds, or again, we need to score at least 3 points in the upcoming game, are examples of goals that we can measure. Did we reach those? Didn't we reach those? Why? And also, right, establishing goals that are lofty, that are high, is a really good factor in group motivation. You might be familiar with the phrase, shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And in the same way, right, setting kind of high goals for the group as the sort of pedestal of what the group could ideally, under the best of circumstances, achieve is really important. Even though your group might not meet those goals and might feel frustration or disappointment that they didn't quite get there, right, you could do what's considered a reach goal, something that is not necessarily an easily achievable goal, but one that, if it happened, would be excellent, and at the very least, maybe something to consider for the future, right? So for instance, if you're applying to things like colleges and universities, oftentimes people will have a reach school or program that they don't necessarily think that they'll get into, but they're going to apply or do it anyway in the event that it could be an option that they get to. So again, setting those goals is a really important way to get people participating and actively working together. So when it comes to collaborating and working together, right? Collaboration being the idea that a group can be more than the sum of its parts. By talking, by brainstorming, if you're brainstorming something such as a birthday party, right, that you're really able to get people on the same page. That's motivated with a couple of elements. We're oftentimes motivated to collaborate for an instrumental reason. Instrumental being a sort of cost-benefit analysis. You might think back about 2 or 3 weeks ago when we talked about cost-benefit analysis, right? It's kind of like balancing the scales. So if you work with a partner in the class on a project, you know there are going to be some costs, such as finding a time to meet together, using the sort of mental and physical energy to meet up with that person, but also benefits. You're able to learn from that person, keep each other on task, keep each other responsible, and therefore determine that it's worth the risk and it's better to work with that person. In the same way, you're making these kinds of calculations all the time. So when we're deciding to collaborate or work together with other people, we're determining that it is better to work with that other person than it is to work alone. For instance, I've had some projects in classes where people have the option to either work with other people, because they think splitting up the work and working in groups is a thing that's good, or people who may be a little bit anxious or concerned about group members' participation and decide to go it alone. And so instrumental reasons sort of govern a lot of the decisions there. Another idea here that is useful in thinking about how group members are motivated is this idea of material exchanges, right? Or transfers of rewards. A really good example of this is perhaps you and your teammates have put together a bake sale or drive or fundraiser because your team qualified for nationals, but your team needs some additional funding and support in order to be able to travel and meet the travel costs. So your team all works together to fund this drive, to host, and to have the building of funds, and deals with the idea that there's a material exchange, that all group members will be able to travel and do this national trip as a result of your collaboration and work together. That by working together in a group, you not only have the opportunity to maybe better achieve your rewards, but that the rewards themselves can be shared, again, in this case, funds for nationals, among everybody in the group. Obviously, that can raise some concerns too, that it means things are a little bit split up. Not everybody gets the full pie, but instead a slice of the pie. But that's another consideration, right? You go it alone knowing that you would get all the rewards, or you collaborate knowing that maybe everybody gets a little bit less, but by sharing the reward, you're still able to achieve the task. Another key thing that motivates our collaboration and engagement with other people in the group, right, is this idea of a social link, right? A social link being a deep, meaningful, or thoughtful connection that you're able to form with somebody else, including a member of the group, right? And a lot of us have them with things like our close friends. Maybe there's a coworker or sibling or somebody that really matters to you. And as a result of that, we feel that that connection adds value to our lives. And because the social link adds value or adds meaning to our relationships, right, we see it as a benefit to collaborating or working together in a group. For instance, maybe you have a friend in this or another class, and you want to get to know and form a better relationship with that or roommate. As a result of working together to cram for an exam, you and that roommate become closer, and by becoming closer, you're better able to work together, to collaborate, and to feel comfortable with each other, right? So the rewards, the incentives that we feel that compel us to participate are not just motivated by things like our social needs, but also by this kind of instrumental movement. When it comes to encouraging people to collaborate and work together, right, there are a few ways that we can help to make collaboration happen. Knowing that, one major problem to your effective group participation is that you can put people in a room, but you don't necessarily give them the opportunity to collaborate or reach out to each other. One key way that you can do this is to appeal to the sort of social links and social connections that members of a group have. For instance, if somebody puts a friend on a blind date, right? They're saying that these two people have something in common, there's something that's mutually shared, therefore, right, they're appealing to some type of link between those people that'll help them get to know each other better. Or if you're a team leader, team captain, or manager, you might say, hey, you should meet Bob. Bob went to the same high school as you and knows a thing or two about soccer. So you might appeal to some potential connections people might have with each other and use that to spark collaborative relationships. Figuring out and again revisiting the goals of the group is a super important idea too, right? If your goal of the group is to score at least 3 points in the game, you might be thinking about, okay, well, in order to do that, we need some good, offensive positioning. We need to have, really good training on scoring goals and so on. And as a result of doing that, we can form collaborative relationships that will get us there. Another idea that I think is useful when we're thinking about collaboration, what's known as a relational contract. Relational contract suggests that there's an agreement that's formed among members of a group that ensures that the group members are able to work together to accomplish a task to deal with an issue. For instance, if you're working with a partner on a school project or assignment, you might say, hey, I will get my notes and my study guide over to you by Friday. And so creating those kind of verbal agreements among people in a group helps to have those really clear, identifiable milestones that let people work together well. Thinking big and long-term, of course, is a really important role too. When we think systemically, we're not just thinking about who we are in the group, who another person is in the group, but we're instead thinking about it collaboratively as a team, as a group of individuals together. I'll give you an example, again, from when I did speech and debate, right? So, we would send individuals and partners on the team who would compete in speech and debate events. And while we were all a team together, right, we would have these individual events that we were completing and doing on our own. And as a result of completing and placing well, we would get what were called sweepstakes points, where each person on the team qualified for like a final round or who placed at the tournament would receive points for the school. And so we would have what was known as a sweepstakes award, where these schools that accumulated the most points would win. And so we were motivated toward sweepstakes awards because not only is it cool, right, to get first place in a speech event, but the idea being that by accumulating points for the team as a whole, that you were engaging systemically. You were thinking about the overarching success of the team. And we would oftentimes strategically, have people compete in events that would allow our team as a whole to accumulate as many points as possible. So systemic thinking is about thinking broadly about how all the individual parts and pieces of a group can work together. Another really core idea that can help with groups and their participation and success is this idea of organizational memory. That if you're part of a club or a team or activity, that this activity's history, its previous successes and work can be really instrumental in shaping the group and shaping how current members of the group act. For instance, again, if you're involved with some type of team or activity or group on campus, there's a good chance that they have like a display case with trophies, with accomplishments, with photos, or similar things like that. Or that there's some type of document or information that tracks the previous success of that organization. Another example is like press and PR, the ways in which the circulation of online materials or information is used to create the history of the group. And also to celebrate accomplishments. If you reach your goal, right? For instance, if a team has successfully completed a film, there's typically what's known as a wrap party, right? That's a wrap, we finished up, we have a party or an opportunity for all the castmates to work together. Or, your team wins a big game and your coach says, you know what, I'm going to take you all out to dinner, right? That would be an example of creating this sense of accomplishment and satisfaction on completing the task. In addition to that, I think it's important to think about feedback, right? So feedback can be challenging, especially if we're occupying this sort of leadership role or we're taking on a collaborative role, right? So feedback is a crucial way by which we can help our goals be met and to help to motivate the participation of people in the group. And one of the challenges that we feel in regards to feedback might be to feel like we're not in a position or have some level of authority to give feedback. We might also consider ourselves kind of conflict averse and not really big fans of like stepping in and offering feedback, right? So feedback is not always wanted, but feedback can be a really important tool to better help people realize their goals. For example, right, if you were on the golf team and every single time you golfed, your swing was completely off and wrong, and, you kept, getting it in the bunker and not doing very well, then obviously feedback and a correction to improve your swing would be crucial. So feedback in general refers to a response to a message. It doesn't necessarily need to be constructive or need to offer advice. In fact, if we think about the transactional model of communication, the idea that there's a sender, there's a receiver, there's noise, and so on, feedback is a natural part of the communication process. When we hear somebody talking and they're telling us this like really scary story of how a bear like chased them when they were out in the woods, right? Then our eyes are going to widen. We're going to be shocked. We're going to be gasped. We're going to gasp, right? We're going to ask a question and say, really? Right? Feedback is a natural thing that we do when we hear a message, that we're motivated through our verbal or nonverbal communication to respond. So that's feedback. But feedback that is designed to be constructive or to support the interests of the group can be considered more in terms of assessment. So assessment is about feedback that notes the quality of the work, the behavior, and so on that people are doing. So for instance, if you received a physical checkup or physical assessment about your participation in a group, even something like a COVID test, right? That's sort of an assessment of whether or not you have contracted COVID-19. So assessment is a way for people within a group to sort of figure out how they're doing in relationship to goals and to maybe improve or course correct what people can do. As a leader in a group, we have to use feedback in order to help to guide members of the group. Benchmarks, right, refer to sort of milestones or goals that we might aim to use in care. So for instance, if somebody is meeting the benchmark, they're where they need to be in relationship to the group's goals. So for instance, maybe your benchmark is to be able to run an 8-minute mile. And if you successfully ran the 8-minute mile, you've met the benchmark. So these are important considerations. It's also important to consider how to offer feedback that's useful, right? Because there might be situations in which you receive feedback or criticism that doesn't seem like it's very relevant or helpful or applicable to your own life. So there's a few different ways that we can consider feedback that can be useful or helpful. First of all, it needs to be relevant, right? When I did speech and debate, unfortunately, there were a concerning percentage of judges at tournaments who would not assess the content of the speech, the quality of the speech, but would instead make comments about people's physical appearance and like talk about, their dress, which, was an incredibly sexist way of creating irrelevant information in their evaluation. So get rid of the irrelevant information, bring in information that is useful, relevant, and helpful to the situation. Frequency is important too. How often are you checking in with somebody about their progress toward a goal? So frequency, really making sure you're having that regular contact is important. Simplicity matters too, because if somebody writes paragraphs and paragraphs of feedback for you on like a group project, but you can't make heads or tails of it, and it's really complicated, it's not useful. Boil it down to really specific, actionable things. Again, when I did speech debate and coached it, oftentimes I would have a really long list of things that students could do to improve. But by focusing to just like 2 or 3 core aspects, I could focus on greater depth and really help to make it clear to students what they needed to work on and give them, not a laundry list, but instead some actionable goals to work on for next time. Candor refers to honesty, right? The idea that you're clear, you're honest, you're really making sure that people regularly understand what you have to say. That you're not afraid to hold back on specific pieces of criticism. If you're like me, you know that criticism is not always fun. It's not great to work hard on a project, work hard in a group, and kind of get broken apart by it, right? And to get feedback that feels really harsh. But feedback can provide a way to get better and to improve. Civility, right, means showing respect and support for other people. So I get feedback all the time whenever I submit research to journals, right? I get reviewers who offer some Being civil means making sure that you're being respectful, that you're presenting information in a useful way. Again, using things like the compliment sandwich, here's a positive thing, here's a constructive thing, here's another positive thing, can be especially useful in providing good feedback. Being specific, right? Identifying particular things that somebody could do a little bit better. For instance, maybe somebody is presenting in a group and you say, hey, what if you stood a little bit to the side here instead of in front of the projector? That would improve your work. And then this idea of eclecticism, that you're able to provide enough variation in your feedback. If the only feedback is one thing over and over and over you're telling somebody to do, it's not very useful. So I think it's finding an appropriate level of variation in the feedback that you offer. Again, if you find yourself as like a team leader, a manager, or occupying this kind of role, then feedback becomes really important. So some things to consider when you're figuring out sort of the role of feedback and the way that you might be offering the feedback of the group. One of them is the configuration and patterns of the group. Who is working together? How many people are in the group? How many people are regularly attending the group? For instance, if you have a group of 3 and they always go off task, maybe you split up that smaller group and have a different set of people work together. The actions of the group, what do they do? So if they're holding a meeting and it's an hour long and they just ramble and get off task the whole meeting, then that's something that you could work on. What is the relationship of what the group is doing relative to the goals that they're trying to achieve? So again, if you're part of a soccer team and you're trying to figure out how to score more goals, but you're instead talking about how to be a good goalie, maybe that doesn't necessarily connect as specifically to the goals that you've set out for the group. How good is your communication? Are you all honest and clear with each other about issues that have come up? Are people talking and regularly keeping in touch with one another? Those are important things to consider too. Are people openly able to express their concerns or disagreements? How's progress, right? Are people on track to reach those goals? So one thing I'm a really big fan of is working backwards. Starting with the goal or outcome that you hope the group can achieve, and then working through and making sure that everybody in the group can get there. Individual satisfaction, right? Doing something like anonymous feedback is a great way to do that, to ensure that the person feels like they're included, all able to participate in a group. Using icebreakers or activities to get people engaged can also help too. And then lastly, external views about the group. In fact, this is what you're doing or have recently completed, right, in your observation. Getting an outsider perspective about how the group behaves and acts can be really useful to reduce some of the impacts of groupthink and to incentivize people to work together. So get some outside perspectives that might help your group more effectively work together. So what I want to do now, as part 2 of your attendance, is to apply some of the things that we've talked about today. So Sally is a new coach and has decided to coach a middle school women's soccer team. Using some of the things we've talked about for today, what can she do to motivate the teammates to succeed? So how can she help members of this team, reach their goals, to win games, to have fun and have a good experience? So think first about motivation. Secondarily, how can she create collaboration, right? If motivation is what can make individuals work well together, how collaboration is how do you get people communicating, talking, and creating relationships within the group. And then lastly, and again, you can think a little bit about how things like age, demographics, and so on might impact the process. How can Sally use feedback and assessment to help members of this middle school soccer team? So I'll give you some time to work on and again to apply some of the things that we talked about today in this problem. Give you about 2 or 3 more minutes to continue to work on this. Go ahead and finish up for thought or idea that we're feeling. I'll be asking a few folks to share. All right. So with regard to this first question, using what we've talked about in the class so far, how can Sally motivate teammates to succeed? So let's go to Zoom. So Jacob, what were some of the things that you wrote in response to this question?
Okay, so, oh my gosh, microphone's going wonky. So what I wrote is that first what she could do is define specifically what she wants them to do so that there is a definite finish line, something they can work towards and something they can, you know, kind of work at finishing so that it's not just out in the open wherever they finally land. And then another one that I put is that she could give them feedback. She could, you know, when they do well on a practice, you know, maybe she brings snacks or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, so I really like the idea that you have good clarity in the things that they need to do, right? So you need to meet for practice twice a week, Monday, Wednesday at 3 p.m. And also to use things like rewards, incentives, bringing in things like snacks to compel people to participate too. Really good points there with regards to participation. Secondarily, how can Sally foster collaboration within the group? Sadie, let's hear from you.
I just said that Sally could foster collaboration by identifying and revisiting the goals that you maybe set with your team for like motivation and stuff, and then just keeping them in mind throughout the whole season. And I said she can also celebrate accomplishments that the groups achieve.
Yeah, right. So celebrating accomplishments plays a really big role, ensuring that people feel reinforced, that they feel excited, that they know that something good happens when they're able to get where they want to go, for sure. And then to this last question, how can Sally use feedback and assessment within the group to help participation? Meg, what did you have to share?
I said that she can, like, after the game and stuff, point out like what they need to work on for the next game, but then like end it with something that they did good.
Yeah, right. So you know, having the opportunity for people to have both, here's some things that went well that we can continue to do, here's some things to work on. It'd be great. Compliment, like sandwiches, balancing out compliments and feedback is not only useful because, you know, it can help to soften the flow of getting constructive criticism, but it also, like, if it feels like all you're getting is like negative comments or constructive criticism, it can be hard to figure out, well, what did I do well? What went okay? What can I continue to do? So having that combo helps people feel connected. Yeah, so Haley, I just had folks share their responses here with regard to these questions. So people had some good observations about how to create collaboration. So thanks for sharing a little bit here. So to wrap up for today, we've talked a bit about collaboration, the idea that people within a group can work together effectively. We talked about the importance of feedback, evaluations that help members of the group work together. And we talked about motivation that will help people to be compelled to participate and work together. Our last week of new content next week will be about conflict. How do groups manage or deal with conflict and issues that might arise? Look forward to that for next week. I will post the presentation schedule, more information about these last 2 weeks in the class on Canvas. So stay tuned for Canvas announcement about that. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. And look forward to seeing you again next week. Please pass forward or email your attendance for the day. Thank you.